Let's talk about Jordan Peterson and something that I learned from him that changed my life, radically changed my life. In 2017, I was a pastor of a church in a network of church planting churches that had become cultish. The leadership model in this network of churches was spiritually abusive. And this caused me an enormous amount of pain. So I was in a top-down structure in this network as a pastor. So on paper, and maybe in fact, I had total power over this entire church, while network leadership, particularly one man, had total power over me. The model for leadership was that a church leader, a spiritual leader, has 100% control over a person that he leads. And this control was not overt. This control was somewhat under the surface. What would happen is you would come to the church and you would start to get involved, and then you would be groomed by the leadership to obey authority. And no one ever came out and really said it at first. They would just test you out. They would tell you to do things, and if you would do it, they would tell you to do more things, and if you would do it, they would tell you to do more things. They would give you approval if you listened to them, and they would give you disapproval and move you to the outside if you didn't. And in that way, they built an inner circle of approval seekers who would do whatever they said. And then they would go to the Bible and say, hey, it says obey your leaders. So you need to think whatever we think. You need to do whatever we say. And that's how biblical leadership works. That's really not how biblical leadership is supposed to work. But I didn't know this at the time. I'd been in this group for 16 or 17 years and had slowly been groomed into a place of complete and utter bondage to a leader. And I felt like a child. I was in pain. I felt the pain of living for the approval of other people, particularly a leader, but not being able to get enough of it to feel like I'm okay. Here I am, a Christian. I know the gospel. I know that Jesus has accepted me unconditionally by virtue of his own sacrifice on the cross. I know my Father in heaven has created me, called me, saved me, and set me free as a new creation. I knew all that, and yet I didn't feel it because I was completely in bondage to a leader who believed with all his heart that he was doing the right thing. In this pain and confusion and conflictedness, I would wake up at 1 o'clock in the morning almost every day after going to bed at like 8 or 9. I was falling apart physically because of this. I was seeking, I was searching, I was reading scripture, I was reading books. I was trying to figure out, why am I hurting? Why am I not able to just conform? Why am I pushing up against this system? Other people seem to be fine with it. I wasn't doing well with that, but I wasn't sure why. Well, around this time, this was 2017, and it's the first time that I became aware of Jordan Peterson. This is right after he had made his bold stance against the Canadian government on compelled speech. I just thought it was interesting. It came up in my YouTube feed, and then I started to watch his lectures. Now, everybody by this point knows who he is. I'm going to tell you what was so profound to me and helpful was the things that he said about speaking the truth, no matter what, not lying, or at least not listening to a lie, believing a lie, perpetrating a lie, and then also obeying your conscience. And his extremely helpful analysis of how communism came to be through his understanding of Solzhenitsyn and the Gulag Archipelago, how Nazism came to be, his analysis of the book Ordinary Men about a German police force that when they were first told to murder the Jews in Poland, I think it was, they didn't want to do it. It made them vomit. They didn't want to do it. But because they didn't obey their conscience, they gave themselves over to the Nazis. Within less than a year, they were these bloodthirsty killers, torturing women and children and fighting for the opportunity to do it. And that very few of them resisted. So from there, I went on to read 1984, Brave New World, and all kinds of stuff like that. And I really believed what Peterson was saying. This rang true. This began to give me some semblance of understanding of why the thing that I was involved in was hurting me so bad. Why was I not able to grow up? Why did I not feel like a whole person, a real person? Why did I not feel like a solid person? So I finally came to the conclusion that what I needed to do was obey my conscience. And I'd gotten down on one issue against the leadership of our church network that I knew I could not obey them on. I couldn't just do what they said. I had a different idea, and it had something to do with my own family, my own children, and how they wanted me to manage my own family. And without getting into the details, I understood that, hey, I have to obey my conscience here, because if I do what you say against my own conscience, I see what happens in history. I will lose my conscience. And every cult, every totalitarian regime, every situation where people give away their conscience to a leader, they become subhuman. And that's when things happen, like whole groups of people drinking Kool-Aid and committing mass suicide and killing their kids, like with Jim Jones. That's what happened in communist Russia. That's what happened in Nazi Germany. I did not want that to happen, and I didn't think that we were thinking of this rightly. So I went to the leader of our network and I said, if 999 times out of 1,000 I'm inclined to obey, but one time out of 1,000, particularly when it comes to my own children, shouldn't I obey my conscience if what you're telling me to do violates my conscience? Because I've understood that if I don't, I will lose my conscience. And if I lose my conscience, I lose my judgment, I lose myself, I lose my personhood, and bad things happen. I said, you're not going to probably have us drink Kool-Aid, but what if the next guy does? And we're all trained to obey whatever the leader says without questioning and without thinking. Because we were taught that it was not humble, it was rebellious, it was satanic to question authority. He said, I don't understand. Why don't you think it because I think it? And I said, I almost always do think it because you think it. I'm just saying, if one time out of 1,000 I don't, shouldn't I obey my conscience? He said, that would be like if you told your kids to go to bed and they said, no, my conscience won't allow it. And I said, no, I don't agree with that. I don't believe that a church leader is like the father of a minor child. It's not the same thing. I was created alone. I was saved alone. And I'm going to be judged alone. That is, held accountable for my choices. The leadership would say, hey, if you do what we say and it turns out to be the wrong thing, God is not going to hold you accountable. He's going to hold the leaders accountable. And the truth is, he is going to hold the leaders accountable, but he's also going to hold me accountable for violating my conscience. Why was I waking up at 1 o'clock in the morning? Because I was so conflicted. Because part of me was trying to obey, and the other part of me knew that that was wrong. And now I understood why, thanks to Jordan Peterson, who at the time I didn't even think was a Christian, but I just thought he was correct about this. I think he might be one now, but I'm not 100% sure about that. So I said, no, I don't agree with that. And furthermore, the way we're getting people to think it because we think it is by manipulating them, by showing them approval when they do what we say and showing them disapproval when we don't. We're trying to make them think that what they want to do is what we want them to do. We're finding people who have an addiction to approval, and we are capitalizing on that. Because that was me. That was me. So that day, I grew up. That very night, I slept 8 hours, maybe 9, for the first time in a couple of years. Things began to change. Within a short time, we were able to leave that network and start to learn what it means to be human. And a big part of what it means is making choices based on your judgments. Looking at what's going on, judging between right and wrong. So that's not the kind of judgment that Jesus tells you not to have. When he says don't judge, he's talking about not hating people for what they do, but you have to judge between right and wrong. That is what it means to be an image bearer of God. You've been given a mind to reason, to make choices, to judge between good and evil, life and death. This is exactly what God tells the first man. I hold out before you life and death. Obey me, obey my laws, obey reality, accept what is and what's true, and live. Don't, and the result is going to be death. He tells the Israelites, I've held out before you life and death. Choose life. The choice is always between life and death. The choice between right and wrong is always between life and death. And the way that you are able to choose life is to be able to judge what brings life versus what brings death. But to do that, you have to be ruthlessly and relentlessly honest about what you're seeing. And this is what Peterson is talking about when he says, don't lie. Tell the truth. Because if you lie, you warp the structure of reality. If you warp the structure of reality, I think that's his phrase, then you got confusion. You got problems. We're meant to live according to what's actually true. And so we submit to the truth, we tell the truth, we obey the truth, and accordingly, we can live. So that's what I've learned. Actually, I've learned a lot of things from Jordan Peterson. I may make another one of these. I didn't say this earlier, but I hope that you'll subscribe. I hope that you'll like. I even hope that you'll share this. And I hope that you'll tune back in, because I'm going to make videos every week. I think maybe even twice a week. And I feel like I have a lot to unload and want to be able to be helpful, because those of us that have learned a lot the hard way, I think we have a responsibility to share it, and that's what I want to be able to do. If you want to talk to me, you can go to christianman.me, or I think in the notes to this video, you can actually find a link to my calendar. I am gathering information. I want to know, how do these things impact you? What has been your experience with some of these topics? I'm trying to figure out what kind of books can I write, what kind of videos can I make, what kind of articles I can write that would be helpful to people. So I'd love to talk to you. So like, subscribe, sign up to talk to me, and I'll see you next time.